Hey, welcome to Proper Horror Show. I am Chloe and I have a weird take on remakes. You know, the thing that constitutes about 63.72% of cinematic output at the moment? See, the problem I have with most remakes is that the whole motivation and conception behind them is what I would call hugely wrong. The misconception studios have is that people already like the movie, they like the concept and the characters, so they'll probably go and see it again and throw the studio a whole boatload of money. The focus essentially is on popularity and giving people what they want. But, you know, we all know democracy's a complete sham, so the studios should actually focus on movies that are disliked and hated. Okay, facetiousness aside, that is almost what I think. To give an example and to be more accurate, what I'm saying is I don't want to see a Silence of the Lambs movie because I think that story has already been told effectively as well as it could be. Whereas I was far more happy to see Manhunter remade as Red Dragon because I felt there was room for improvement. In short, my rule for remakes is that you should remake a film when the concept is solid, but the delivery is the problem. Like, a disclaimer, there is always room for improvement, but to reveal my power level a tiny bit to you all, you wouldn't re-roll your stats when you already got a 17. In Vermintide, you wouldn't recraft an item when you were close to the maximum bonus, right? Or so I hear from nerds who aren't me. So yeah, treat remakes like getting a pet. Don't go with something that's got a high pedigree. Do a mitzvah and adopt. Get something that had a rough start in life and would flourish with love and attention. We don't need to go remaking Troll 2 or worse, Jack and Diane, but some films got botched in the studio process and the idea behind them is solid, good enough to justify another attempt. You know, all these films on here could have been great, so let's not think of them as remakes, but refines. Huh? How's that for a spin?
I'll try spinning, that's a good trick!
What I'm saying here has precedent. You know, it's well known that Evil Dead 2 is effectively just a remake of Evil Dead when they had enough money, and Don't Breathe is pretty much The People Under the Stairs but with marginally less bondage gear. What? Search your feelings, you know it to be true. All of this is taking a really long way to get to the point of this video, which is naming the remake that I pretty much most want to see and what I think could be the next great Stephen King movie. Needful Things. No, that is a real movie. That's one of his, trust me, look. Many of you could be drawing blanks here, both in terms of an emotional response and memory, and you might be thinking, Chloe, who the hell cares? Why would we want to remake Needful Things? It sucked. Or not that it sucked, it was mediocre. I think calling Needful Things mediocre might be a little harsh. I rewatched it recently and I did enjoy it. But yeah, it could have been better. And it's fine to admit that. There is a lot that was working against this movie. And that's essentially all tied to the fact that it is an early 90s Stephen King adaptation that was made for a TV release, although it did get a shorter edit that was released theatrically. It wasn't one of King's biggest books, it did not get a massively well-known director, and probably the biggest problem is that it came out at the height of the Stephen King craze when pretty much anything he put down on paper got adapted very swiftly. Due to his personal issues, Stephen King wasn't at his best and probably couldn't oversee the projects as much as would have been helpful, and due to the time and studio conditions, the effects and sound quality certainly have some very notable issues. At the peak of the Stephen King craze, everything was getting adapted and rushed, I would say. And so the issues in the production are one of prioritising speed and quantity over quality. Now, they're not all bad, and there are some gems that came through, but so did a lot of dross, frankly. All these factors work against the success of Needful Things, so even though the adaptation has a really good cast and what I think is an amazing premise, the actual adaptation is easy to forget and hard to love. Roger Ebert gives it a 1.5 out of 5, and even when you correct for his habitual bias against horror, It's not good. And there is a larger and newer problem, which is that if people are aware of Needful Things, it is most likely through the lens of ironic, sarcastic, retrospective mockery. Needful Things has a Rick and Morty problem. The High IQ cartoon did an episode which was effectively dunking on a bowdlerized parody of the premise of Needful Things. That is an issue, because for horror to be scary, we have to be able to identify with the scenario and emotionally invest in that and the characters. Nothing works against emotional investment more than cynicism and sarcasm and irony. To really be affected deeply by horror, we have to be empathizing and we have to suspend our disbelief. And that's very tricky when we are dealing with unreal scenarios and plot necessities that stop characters doing what we might naturally do, which is run away and scream for the authorities. Suspension of disbelief is therefore absolutely crucial in horror, but mocking parody kills that. Nothing is going to break the needful, necessary emotional investment in a remake than some intellectual titan screaming out, "I'm Pickle Rick" in the screening. Please don't screen cap me saying I'm Pickle Rick. Hey, that was the end of Act 2 of this video. It was the nadir, the low point. It's onwards, upwards, and being positive from here. Unless you're adapting Shakespearean tragedy or Sarah Kane. Look, the Rick and Morty problem is absolutely there for Needful Things, but it is not a fatal problem. You see, you can make anything ineffective and stupid by bowdlerizing and parodying it. Heck, even though it hides behind 7 proxies of ironic detachment, Rick and Morty is also affected by this stuff. At this point, there are plenty of memes shooting down Rick and Morty for feigned ironic detachment and pretending to be cleverer than it is. So moving on, what I'm saying is a remake of Needful Things that took itself seriously could be a huge success, both commercially and critically, for a number of reasons. Firstly, we are in the middle of a Stephen King revival right now. Pet Sematary, Doctor Sleep, It, and Gerald's Game have all had good or great adaptations. And a lot of studios are looking at the back catalogue and seeing what might be the next hit. Stephen King himself is very aware of this.
What happened to me, I guess, was that It was such a big success that people decided, well, there must be gold in some of that old shit that this guy
Come on.
back in the day. So, you know, a lot of the old stuff maybe is going to get remade, and
studios might look to Needful Things because, heck, it doesn't require a huge budget and a whole load of CGI. Needful Things could work very well on a low budget and be an amazing character piece. But the biggest reason why I think Needful Things deserves a remake and could be a huge success is because the premise of Needful Things is hugely culturally and politically relevant right now. If you're not familiar with the plot, either from the adaptation or the Rick and Morty parody, I'll quickly recount it. A shop called Needful Things opens up in the capital of the Stephen King universe, Castle Rock. People are offered objects that they most desire, but they have to pay a price for it. And the price is always coming at a destabilizing effect. They're asked to play pranks or do some vandalism, and this escalates until the whole community is at war with itself. The premise is very simple and at this point maybe even cliched, but the potential political relevance of it is the power behind it, and that's why it deserves a remake. I'm going to give 3 key examples. For one, we're in a time when the ethics of consumption are at absolute peak relevance. We're looking at our purchases and considering the impact on the environment and on animal welfare. We're looking at our reliance on mass-produced consumer goods from China and how that supports a totalitarian slave labour state, and thinking maybe it would be worth paying a slightly higher price for a greater moral gain. We're looking at how big corporations in our own Western countries are exploiting their hegemony to dodge taxes and offer disgusting working conditions, how they lobby government for special privileges and unearned competitive advantage. and how they're starting to distort the value and culture in our own societies by stifling competition and censoring certain political views. What? Just because I read Hans Hermann Hoppe doesn't mean I can't be nuanced. We're also in an impatient, high-time preference society that is blind to the truth of price and value. We're in an economy and society that has been set up so people can get goods instantly on credit instead of saving for them. People are getting conditioned to get something straight away instead of saving for it. They get it on credit and, damn the debt and future consequences. We have a debt-fueled economy that is dependent on state provision because of greed, conditioning, and a refusal to consider others. We're also living in atomized, disrupted communities that are increasingly divided and turning on each other. Sometimes the cause is cultural, sometimes it's ideological, and sometimes the concerns and grievances are very genuine. But it's all awful for all of us. People being coerced and motivated to hate their neighbours, to antagonize and to vandalize, and things are escalating to the point that authorities cannot handle them.
So I don't actually want to talk politics on this channel.
Liar!
The simple premise of Needful Things speaks to all of this. A malevolent entity arrives in a community and offers people what they most covet instantly. And the price is more than material. In order to have exactly what they want, uncompromised, and entirely at their preference, the residents are turned against each other. It's small things at first, and it escalates and perpetuates and gets increasingly violent. And the horror of this isn't in the supernatural aspect of it, but in how relatable it is. As I've shown, the political and cultural potential of this story is huge, because we're living in the Needful Things world right now. Needful Things has a potential to be the next great Stephen King film. And it's a story we all need to consider. I want this remake.
Real Horrorshow!